evening. So welcome to our stalking question and answer expert panel. This is put on by Project Rev. If you don't know about Project Rev, we're a grant-funded program here at the university. We focus on providing services and education around domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. So those are the issues that we focus on. And tonight, since it's Stalking Awareness Month in January, we're going to focus mostly on stalking, also on its relationship to relationship abuse and domestic violence. So any questions in that realm, please feel free to bring them up. We have volunteers around. Just raise your hands really fast. We've got volunteers around that have little sheets that you can write your answers down anonymously on. So questions, not answers. Your questions down anonymously during the panel as we get going. If something comes up and you think of a question, just raise your hand. They will pass you a sheet and a pencil. You can write down your question, fold it up, give it back to them, and they'll bring it up here to me, and I'll ask our panel. So it's instantaneous gratification here, people. I also wanted to let you guys know that we will be filming this for live webcast on our website. So anything happening is going to be webcast online, and it'll stay on our website for a while. So just FYI, everybody should know that that's going down, and that's why we've got the camera here. Okay? And before we get going with the questions, let me introduce our fabulous panel. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys introduce yourselves, if you'd like. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Len Carter. I'm the investigations captain at the Denton Police Department. I'm also an adjunct instructor here at TWU. I've worked at the Denton Police Department for 17 years and have worked in just about every section there. So I'm glad to be here.
My name is Ryan Calvert. I'm a felony domestic violence prosecutor at the Denton County DA's office. I've been a prosecutor for 9 years, started in Dallas County, and then I've been in Denton County for the last 8. Like I said, I'm assigned to the felony family violence unit, so I handle any major or felony domestic violence case from stalking would be an example, repeat offender, abusers, all the way up to and including capital murder and everything in between.
My name is Lalisha Granberry. I am the temporary Rev counselor and also a counselor intern at Denton Friends of the Family. At Denton Friends of the Family, we work with victims and their families of domestic violence, sexual assault. And that's where I'm at.
I'm Linda Marshall. I'm a professor of sociology and social work here at Texas Women's University. I teach a course on family violence, published a book on protective orders, and I'm a member of the board of directors of Denton County Friends of the Family for a long time, so I work with that agency as part of my interest in domestic violence.
Thank you. We're so happy you guys are here. Thank you all for being here. Our first question is, what does the term stalking really mean? I think this is in a legal sense. I'll shoot that over to you, Ryan.
Thanks. Legally, what stalking means, it's a very convoluted definition. It's not a well-written law, not a well-written definition, and as a result of that, it makes the crime of stalking actually very difficult to prove. Captain Carter and I were just talking before we started about how we actually don't see very many actual stalking cases, and the reason for that is the statute is very specific on what is required, and it's very difficult to prove. I'm getting a thing. Y'all can't hear me in the back. Can y'all hear me in the back? The mics aren't on?
Just looking for the webcast.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, I'll talk real loud then. Okay. Stalking is legally defined. There's several different things you have to have. Number one, the bad guy, the stalker. He has to, on more than one occasion, do something that includes but is not limited to following the victim, but it could be any number of things, but following is the one thing that's specifically listed in the statute. On more than one occasion, engage in behavior that, number one, he subjectively knows will scare her, okay? So we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that guy subjectively knew what I'm doing is going to scare her or likely to scare her. Number two, we have to prove that whatever he was doing actually did scare her or a member of her family. And number three, we have to prove that a reasonable person under those circumstances would have been scared by whatever he was doing on more than one occasion. And so if we have a situation where somebody follows, a woman home one time, maybe even two times, that's probably not going to get us there. Essentially what we have to have is a pattern of conduct over a fairly large period of time that number one she knows about or members of her family know about, that she is scared of, that he knows she is scared of, that he knows would scare her, and that a reasonable person under those circumstances would also be scared. If I can get all that, I can convict you of stalking, but that's a difficult thing to do. But that's what it means legally. Sure.
Anybody else? All right. Next question. How serious is stalking actually? How often is it just annoying, and how often does something violent happen?
Okay.
I can say that the research shows that the vast majority of murders that happen were preceded by stalking. Now that doesn't mean that all stalkings end up in murder, but if you're being stalked, that's a pretty good precursor to something worse happening. And of those women and men who are killed, primarily women, the majority of them had been stalked prior to being killed by their partners. So.
And stalking, it's often a part of domestic violence or relationship violence, what we call stalking, harassment, terroristic threats, that behavior. It often precedes battery or domestic violence, and generally during an episode of domestic violence or whatever, as it starts to cool down, the abuser or whatever will begin to use stalking type behavior to control the victim. So, it's very important when you're looking at violence and stalking, that stalking is a key element of domestic violence. It often is relationship violence or whatever. When a victim comes in to tell you what's happening with them, often the following, the calling, the destroying property, that's usually a part of the whole relationship also. So I'd say they go hand in hand. Definitely.
Thank you. Our next question is, aren't most stalkers mentally unbalanced?
Answer. No.
I would say no.
They're relationship challenged and controllers. I'd say selfish and all those things, self-centered. But if you were to meet one on the street or at a party or something like that, there's no way to look at them or talk to them and know that you're dealing with a future stalker or abuser. So, no.
In fact, most of the time, and I think you'll agree with me on this, Captain, that most of the guys, the really scary guys, like you said, if you were to meet them in public, they are exceptionally good at coming across as the nicest, most harmless people you will ever meet, and then behind closed doors, they're completely different people. But they're very good at showing people what they want to see and hiding what they don't want people to see.
The word that's often used is charming.
Yes,
They're very
absolutely.
charming, and that's the way the relationship often begins. The woman can feel swept off her feet because he's so attentive and so kind and charming, and then it begins to change. So it's really hard to be able to look. There are signs that you can look for in time, but just the person's demeanor right off the bat is hard to know.
Well, and that's also what leads to the cycle of violence is, they'll assault them one time, the victim will leave, and they turn the charm on. I'm sorry, it'll never happen again. I was stressed because of finals, or I was stressed because of work, or I was high, or I was drunk, or whatever. I promise, here's some roses, here's some chocolate. I'm so sorry, never happen again. They come back, and so on and so on and so on, potentially until she gets killed.
And women are really socialized to be nurturers. And when someone says, I want to do better, help me, let's make this work together, it's hard for a lot of women to say, no, I'm finished with you. Give him one more chance is something her pastor, her family, her friends often will tell her, and it's hard for women to not be that nurturer that we've been socialized to be, but that can be a very dangerous road.
I think it's also important to mention that a lot of victims of stalking knew their stalker at some point. They may have been a former partner or maybe a former rejected relationship. So a lot of times, just as in relationship violence, oftentimes victims may have known their stalker in some capacity.
Statistically, 75% of stalking victims knew their stalker beforehand, whether it was an acquaintance or relationship.
I'm actually surprised it's that low.
Yeah.
I figured it'd be higher than that.
It's not huge. Okay, next question. We already answered that. How does stalking affect victims?
Yeah.
I think a lot of times as victims, you may find yourself feeling anxious, wondering about what their next move is going to be, if it's escalated. Sometimes victims complain of depression. A lot of times they become withdrawn. They may not want to go out anymore in public because you may not know if your stalker is going to pop up and show where you are. A lot of victims may miss work or school. Maybe he works with you or was a former coworker or know where you work. Or maybe they know where your class is. Maybe you had a class with them previously. So a lot of times their normal habits and behaviors change and they just feel withdrawn socially. I think it also correlates a lot with women of domestic violence in the sense that they feel helpless and powerless, like that sense of control has been taken from them.
And when you combine it with the fact that a good many stalkers are the former partners of victims of domestic violence, they're already in the process of some sort of post-traumatic stress. The most dangerous time for a woman in a violent relationship is when she leaves. That ups her chances of being seriously hurt or killed because that takes away his control, and that's what domestic violence is about, power and control. And so if that person has had a relationship with someone who has abused them and controlled them, and they leave them, and then the person finds that she's being stalked, then she often feels as though, as you said, she's helpless. How can I get away from this person? A lot of victims of stalking will move, will change their whole lives, and I find that really, sad that they're the ones that are having to move rather than us doing something to help protect her, to keep her life in place and be free of the stalking. But right now, that's what often happens.
Thank you. Let's see. In the majority of stalking cases, are the stalker and the stalked person usually of the same sex or opposite? And also, in Denton, are the majority of stalkers male or female? Do we know?
I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, doctor, but I would say the overwhelming majority of the time it's going to be opposite sex, right? Almost always, not always. I actually just recently had a stalking case where it was former boyfriend stalking new boyfriend, and it was bad. It was really bad. I told y'all it was hard to prove. We could prove that one 6 ways from Sunday. It was real bad. But almost always it's going to be different sexes, and then the overwhelming majority of them are going to be men. The overwhelming majority of stalkers are going to be men.
I read a report today that when you look at the number of men who are stalked, about half of them are stalked by other men. Mm-hmm. So, women do it, but it's a pretty small part of it. But they're capable of doing it too, no doubt. But it's a small portion.
I've seen that statistic too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
If you're a woman being stalked, it's more likely to be a man. If you're a man being stalked, it's about equal. Mm-hmm. The likelihood if it's a man or a woman. So
yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see. What advice can you give to someone who is noticing that they may fall into being a stalker themselves?
If you're becoming obsessed with a woman or a man, and you recognize that it's not rational. There's people that they're spending more time checking on where their spouse or girlfriend is, checking their phones, checking their computers, and so they can't even do their job. They can't do their schoolwork. If you recognize those signs, yeah, you're starting to drift over the edge. We have cases where, over the course of a weekend, a boyfriend has called, 270 times after the girl has told him, stop calling me. And he says, well, I just want to know, are we broken up? Well, she's telling you don't call her. You're probably broken up. Or I just had to hear it from you. It goes both ways, but generally it's not rational to need to. If someone tells you that they don't want to be with you, if they move out, if they move to another state, they don't want to be with you. You don't need to hear it or see it. So if you recognize those signs in yourself, you talk to somebody and get some help before you break the law.
That's actually, it's an interesting question because in my experience, if you recognize that what you're doing is not rational, you're probably fine. Because these guys that are doing this, they don't recognize that it's not rational. I mean, Captain Carter's right, and the cell phones are huge. I mean, we joke in the family violence unit that if we could outlaw keys and cell phones, there would be no more family violence. Because all domestic violence, it seems like, is about one of those two things. But if you think about it, that makes sense. What do those two items represent? Control. Who do you communicate with, and where can you go? And so it is amazing what a large percentage of our violent offenses, assaults, aggravated assaults, capital murder, relationship murder, begin with a set of keys or a set of cell phones. And what you said is correct. We see these guys that, 100 times a day, give me your phone. Give me your phone. Who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? And they don't recognize, they absolutely do not see that that's not normal or that that's not right. So I think if you recognize that in yourself, you're probably okay. Because I've never seen one yet that recognized they were doing something wrong.
But you still might want to talk to yourself about, do I have the right to try to control someone else's behavior? In my research in talking about victims and abusers, it's amazing to me how often you see people who think they can bully their way back into someone's affections. That if I just, pound on her a little bit more, she'll take me back and love me again. That's not real. Speaking of cell phones, I wanted to mention something I was reading about. I had never thought about this, but abusers often can do an application on your cell phone, and the victim may not be aware that it's even on there, and activate the GPS on the cell phone and always know where she is. And the article that I was reading about it said, look at your cell phone and go through the trouble it takes to find out if your GPS has been activated. And it reminded me when I got a new cell phone recently, I didn't know really how to use it, and I depended upon my husband, who is a nice guy, to find out all kinds of stuff. He read the manual online, and I was, I just let him tell me what to do. But that's something I think women might be too inclined to do, is to let somebody else take over the technology in our lives. If it's somebody who doesn't have your best interests at heart, they can fix your cell phones so that they can track you everywhere you go. You guys are nodding your heads. You've seen this.
Well, Alicia, does Friends of the Family, or do y'all know, does Friends of the Family confiscate cell phones when women come into the shelter? Because a lot of shelters are doing that now.
That's under discussion.
For that reason, I've actually, I don't know about Friends of the Family, that's why I was asking, but I know a lot of shelters around the country in the era of smartphones, ideally the location of women's shelters is secret. And, the abusers are not supposed to know where they are. But now everybody has, I don't have one because I'm a loser, but a lot of people have these phones with GPS, tracking capability, and a lot of shelters are having to confiscate phones when women check in and make sure that they're disabled, because there have been several instances of abusers and stalkers tracking their victims to battered women's shelters that are supposed to be secret locations, which is really dangerous.
We recently had a case where it's a former boyfriend there's an app that you can get for free. I won't tell you what it is, but you can install it on your girlfriend's phone and then retrieve all of her messages on your computer. And that's how he would find out what she was doing. She would text somebody, her new boyfriend, and he could sit at home and pull up all her texts. And he met her over there, and he didn't hurt her, but he had been doing this over a long period of time, and he was just getting it right off of her phone, and she didn't know that the app was on her phone. So do move your screen around so that you can see what little apps and icons are on that phone, because he was reading everything that she did.
The next question, what steps can you take to prove someone is stalking you?
I can tell you that. Number one, keep a diary. That's the first thing we ask. If you come in and say, this person is stalking me, we're going to try to get you to explain what actions they're doing. Normally, we're going to break that down into, is he harassing you? Because that's a different offense. Is he threatening you or whatever? And that first time you come into the police department, we're going to call this guy and tell him, hey, don't call her anymore. Don't do this again. That'll be his warning. And then after that...
Now, is that one of those things you talked about earlier? That means she wants to break up with you if the police call you and say she doesn't want to talk to you? Is that one of the signs that you look for?
Yeah, here's your sign. That's the sign. But keep a diary after that, because after we call them, I'd say about half the time, they're going to immediately call the woman and threaten her, or curse her out, or whatever. Start writing that down, because you're going to need that to file a case against them. So the best thing to do is keep a diary. If you have a cell phone, record what they say. There's nothing better than us getting to hear them threatening you, because when we see them, they're going to come in and be this nice guy and tell us what you've done to them. You've put sugar in their gas tank, all these things to them. And often they will have a recording or a phone message where you've called them, cursing them or threatening them, or either telling them how much you love them or whatever it is. So protect yourself, document what's going on. That's the best thing you can do from our point of view.
Have a friend. If there's somebody else, a friend or family member that has seen him, maybe following you, or has heard him, calling you over and over again or something like that, have them write down what they saw and make those people known to law enforcement. If you get voicemails, a lot of times these guys, they're not very smart, and they'll call and they'll leave you voicemails threatening you or whatever. For God's sakes, don't delete those, or text messages. Do not delete those. Save those things. My favorite thing as a prosecutor is to have threatening or harassing voicemails or text messages that I can take into court and wave around in front of a jury and go, look what this guy's doing. But like you heard Captain Carter say, a lot of times he's recording what you do as a victim, and if he pushes you and pushes you and pushes you until you snap and you call him and you leave him a nasty voicemail cussing him out, he's going to save that. If you don't save anything and the case comes to me as a prosecutor, well, I've got you saying that he's stalking you, but not much to document it, and then his attorney walks in and plays me this recording of you screaming at him like a banshee and cussing him out and putting sugar in his gas tank. Okay, that's not a good stalking case. I can't prove that case. But document anything you can do. If you catch him following you, or if he's driving by your house, get a camera, start taking pictures. I've even seen victims, and I think this is a great idea, if it gets real bad, do you know what deer cams are, or game cams? You buy them at Cabela's. You tie them to a tree or a stick or whatever, and they're motion activated. And we get pictures of these guys creeping up, looking in windows or slashing tires or whatever they're doing. Great evidence. But just document any and every way you possibly can.
Excellent. Okay. We talked a little bit about cyber stalking. Is that something you're seeing more now?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it pretty often. And on that, the emails and all that, again, save the emails. What you'll get is the same as with the telephone. you tell a guy to quit sending you threatening emails, or even emails that tell you how much he loves you and misses you and all that. If you tell them to stop, they have to stop. So we're seeing a lot of that. Another thing that we're seeing, and I would advise you guys, do not watch who you send like compromising pictures of yourself. We get a lot of, you broke up with them and now they've plastered nude pictures of you all over the place. And they're doing it to control you, to harass you, to intimidate you into coming back. That happens a lot more than you would think, that some guys sent that up to your work, pictures of you. And it's just basically to control you, to embarrass you, to where they become the focus of your life again. So, but stalkers use the computer just like they use telephones and cars and anything else.
Sometimes they'll post things about the victim on chat rooms or blogs and different things, and if you run across anything about yourself and they're calling you a whore, and because love can turn to hate very quickly. Someone who loves her is now going to ruin her reputation. Document that too. Get copies of it. Even if you can't be positive, if they don't sign, if there's a pattern going on, then the police need that, and the prosecutors need that. Because humiliating you in public is another weapon that stalkers will use.
I think also good safety planning with technology is important. Make your Facebook page private. If you have Twitter, don't get on Twitter and post where you're going. I'm going to the mall with such and such. Just be extra private with what you're posting online, because anyone can see that. If you do have someone on your profile, maybe make that profile limited. Facebook has all these extra features now. You can control who sees what. Or just go ahead and delete that person. Or don't accept random friends or random followers that you really don't know. Just being safe as far as technology is concerned is important.
And the online dating. Be careful, who you meet up with, that you've met them online, but and then you physically go and meet them. We've had cases where girls have met somebody that's come in from out of town, and they let them stay the night at their apartment, and they wake up with their wallet stolen. I mean, all kinds of their identity stolen. The people that you meet online, some of them are just coming out of prison, or they're sex offenders. You really have to be careful with inviting somebody into your life that you've met on the computer. Even though they call them friends on Facebook, just because they're on the computer and they're your friend, they may not be your friend. So just like you would physically or in person, know the people that you let into your life. I mean, you're special. You mean something to yourself and somebody. Why would you let a stranger, get that close to you? It's dangerous to do that.
And I don't know if y'all know this, but people lie on the internet. So sometimes the things they say about themselves are not true, so just be aware of that.
About cyber stalking and high-tech stalking, I would say if you break up with someone who's been controlling and you're afraid of that person, the advice is get rid of everything, your SIM card, your passwords, start over, because that person is likely to have information on how to get to you. So if you're finished with somebody and you feel as though they have the potential to stalk you or harm you, start all over. Call your phone company. Get a new situation with your computer. Check your car, because sometimes people will get a cell phone, hide it in your car with the GPS activated, and follow you. So, once somebody's out of your life, make sure they don't have some technical way to get to stay in touch with you if you don't want to be aligned with them anymore.
So we have a question. Did someone raise their hand a minute ago? Yes.
With the cyber stalking, I was wondering, for you, Ryan, how would you prove someone like that was cyber stalking someone? Like, for instance, if someone was on Facebook, because some people get each other's passwords.
Yeah.
And what if, it wasn't actually the stalker, it was someone else?
It's hard, but there's ways you can do it. Computer forensics are a new field in law enforcement. It's really pretty incredible, and there are investigators. We have one in our office. I think Denton has some that have it's amazing what they can do. If we believe and have probable cause to believe that Captain Carter is maybe hacked into an account or is cyber stalking me. I don't know why you would, but if we can establish probable cause that it's him, we can get a search warrant for his computer. We can go to his house, take his computer, and they can actually get in the computer and see, did it come from his computer? Even if he's hacked somebody else's account and it's coming from somebody else's name. IP addresses, they can tell a lot of times what computer a message or an email or a post is coming from by the IP address, and it's almost like a fingerprint. It's coming back to his computer. There's ways to do it. Another thing that a lot of times I think these guys that engage in this kind of behavior don't think about, well, I know they don't think about, is the content of what they're saying. If they send an email that's threatening, I mean, can I always prove that it came from that guy's computer? What if he used one of these computers in this common area? No, I can't. I mean, that's open to a million different people. But in court, the content of a message can, what we call, authenticate the message. If I can prove that the content in that message could only have come from that guy who knows about this situation, if it's things like names, dates, what she's wearing, where they were, specific details that would be unique to the victim and the offender, that is enough to get that into evidence in court and use that against him. It's no different from if I have a letter. It's no different from a letter. I don't have to do handwriting analysis to have somebody prove scientifically, that guy wrote that letter if the content in that letter is unique to that person. And so that's a way we can do it as well. And that's something that we do sometimes because these guys, in this age of technology, they send emails, they send text messages, things like that. If the contents of those things could only have come from that guy, and we can prove that, then we can get him.
Thank you for your question. I want to also just remind everybody, because I know we have some people that weren't here from the beginning. If you have a question while we're talking here, just raise your hand and one of our volunteers will come and give you a little question sheet. You can write your question anonymously, fold it up, give it back to them. They'll bring it up here to me and I'll ask the question, okay? So just remember that if you think of anything and you are not so brave and you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand and give us your question that way as well. Okay, next question. How common is stalking?
The actual offense of stalking is not common. I've been in law enforcement for 17 years. I've only seen one case where we charged them with stalking, but the behavior, the harassing, window peeping, all those things, very common. It's the phone calls and text messages and threats. It's one of the major calls that we deal with quite a few of those, and it's one of our main calls that we get at the police department. That my boyfriend keeps calling me, won't stop calling me. He keeps showing up at my work. They told him not to come up here. That's very common, but to actually get stalking, which is a felony case, very rare, because it's easier to prove those offenses that occur as part of the overall stalking than it is to prove a stalking case, when you say.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, just today, this morning, I got a phone call from a victim who, ex-boyfriend, they broke up. They're older. They're in their 40s. She has teenage children that go to a private Christian school. She broke up with him. She left him. So he sent an email to literally every parent and school teacher, school administrator, every single adult that has anything to do with that school on the email list. He sent her like this 5-page single-space manifesto email of all of her sexual behavior, her sexual partners. She lies about her income to get her kids scholarships at this private school. The things you were talking about earlier. I mean, in an effort to control and get her back, he did all that. So we charged him with harassment, because that's what that is. Well, then on one occasion, he followed her to the grocery store, and he told her, if you don't come back to me, I'm going to kill you and your daughter, who was 16 at the time. And so a case got sent up. Well, where he's being charged with harassment and terroristic threat, which is exactly what you were just talking about. She called me today, kind of upset, wanting to know why he wasn't being charged with stalking. So I had to have with her the conversation that Captain Carter just had with y'all. I can't prove stalking because, like I talked about earlier, the statute requires all these different things and multiple incidents. I didn't really have that in this case, but I can prove terroristic threat and harassment. Those are easier crimes to prove, and so you're correct. We get a lot of that kind of stuff, but I've been doing this 9 years. I could easily count on one hand the number of actual felony stalking cases that I've seen.
So this studies say that 31,000 true stalking cases happened in 2009. That's the last figure I saw. That's not a lot.
No.
Because it's really hard to prove at that level. But I think all of us in this room don't want to be harassed either. And harassment is easier to prove.
Yes.
You can get, now let me ask a question while I'm up here. Can you get any kind of a protective order about harassment?
Yeah, and that,
I thought so. Okay.
if there is violence or threats of violence in a domestic violence or dating relationship, you can get a protective order. And I'm actually glad you said that. That's another way we can get at these guys that isn't stalking. Violating a protective order is a criminal offense. It's potentially a felony criminal offense. And so that's another much easier crime that we can prove that encompasses a lot of the behavior that we kind of generalize as stalking, is VPO, or violating a protective order. And so we use that one a lot as well.
So report harassment,
Yep.
even if you think, well, it might not rise to the level of a true stalking case, because those laws are written very precisely, and harassment doesn't. But go ahead and report harassment, because it often is a step along the way. And then if you get a protective order, as he said, and that person violates the protective order, they have then committed a felony.
It's not,
Or
they've committed a crime.
criminal.
VPO can be a felony, depending on it's one of the crimes that's enhanceable. If
Right.
you certain crimes like DWI, domestic violence assault, if you have a history of doing that, subsequent crimes can be a felony. DWI, for example, your first one's a Class B misdemeanor, second one's a Class A, third one's a third-degree felony. VPO is exactly the same way. If you have 2 prior VPO convictions, your third one is a felony. Or if you have a protective order in place and you assault the victim. If somebody has a protective order on you and you physically assault her, regardless of whether you have any priors, that's a felony. And so, yeah, you can get a protective order, and that's another way we can charge somebody with a crime.
All right, I have our last question for the evening, sort of a two-parter. How do you make stalking stop, and how do you cope in the meantime?
How do you stop stalking? You can't stop what somebody else is doing, but one thing that I noticed that makes investigating cases hard is if you determine that you're through with somebody. If you're afraid of somebody, you really need to be through with them and have them out of your life. If you have to think, is this person going to hurt me? So once you start down that path, don't go back and forth. If you say that you're done with a guy, he's been threatening you or he's hit you, even these guys that like to punch walls, that behavior right there, that's a big warning sign for you. If a guy's punching walls, you're next. You can believe that. So if you say, okay, I'm done with the guy, I don't like him harassing me or whatever, be done with him. Don't go back, because that person will begin to escalate their controlling behavior. So if you file a case against them, you're an adult, don't think of yourself as a victim. Follow through with that case. You're going to have to be strong and follow it all the way out, because it will hurt your case to keep going back and forth. That we call the guy and now he's at your house. It may take a week before we call the suspect back, and now he's at the house and he answers the phone when we call him. We can still file the case, but you're making it harder, and you're also it's going to get more dangerous for you to go back and forth with somebody that you're already afraid of. So stopping it, you probably can't, but you can certainly make yourself safer if you'll just stay away from somebody that you're afraid of. You shouldn't be afraid of someone that you love or care about. That's the first thing. So that's what I would say.
I think along the lines of coping, something that I focus on with my clients is safety planning. Whereas making sure if you take the same route home and maybe your stalker knows before you go home, change up your routine. As far as the technology, make your page private, the things that I talked about earlier. Oftentimes we just focus on ways to maybe be assertive and set boundaries with people. If your stalker does call you, oftentimes document, but also ways to set boundaries. Because a lot of times we may not want to hurt their feelings and say, I'm not interested or leave me alone. But setting clear, firm boundaries with them is really important. So a lot of times coping is just talking about it with someone so you feel less alone, so you feel less helpless, and so you feel like you can control your life and your surroundings.
And I would encourage anybody to talk to somebody about it. A lot of times victims are pretty isolated, emotionally or physically. Go to the TWU Counseling Center. Come to Friends of the Family. There are good counselors there. And just talk this over with somebody and say, do I have a reason to be afraid? And never mistake control for love. A person who loves you is not going to try to diminish you as a human being. It's just not love. And if you're confused about that, reach out and talk to somebody who is maybe not part of your circle of friends, at Friends of the Family, or we have a good counseling center here at TWU. It's free.
Project
and it's
Rev.
good. Huh?
Project Rev.
Mm-hmm.
And Project Rev. That's the Friends of the Family presence here at TWU. So thank you, Stephanie.
Last thing, I would encourage you to take it seriously. If you find yourself asking that question, should I be afraid? There's a good chance the answer is yes. And I think a lot of times victims think, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. I don't want to waste the police department's time. It's probably no big deal. What's not a big deal is going and reporting what's going on. I mean, the worst thing that happens is the police call the guy and say, hey, back off, and he does. That's the worst thing, or, worst case scenario in terms of embarrassment or anything like that. So don't be embarrassed. Like you said, take your safety very seriously. Because you're potentially literally taking chances with your own life. Don't do that. If you think you might have a reason to be concerned, you probably do. And so act on those fears. Don't just sit on them.
On that note, I just want to remind you guys that there are a lot of resources available if you or somebody that you know is in a dangerous situation. Project Rev is here. We have advocacy help. We can help with counseling. We can help you advocate with your professors if you need to miss class or something because you're afraid of running into your stalker or something like that. Additionally, Friends of the Family is a fantastic resource. Our counseling center, the police, are here to keep us safe. So call on them if you need them. Additionally, please pick up a brochure on your way out. It tells a little bit about what Project Rev does. We have some stalking brochures back there as well that have some contact information. The National Center for Victims of Crime has a hotline that you can call, 1-800-FYI-CALL. If you call them, there's somebody there 24/7, and all that information is on that back table if you want to grab some. Even if you never need it, somebody that you know might, and you'll have that information right there when you need it. I have one more thing. I have a prize, one prize, for somebody who can, first person to raise their hand who can tell me what is one thing you can do to prove that someone's stalking you. Right here, NHS, yes.
One thing you can do to prove someone's stalking you is if you have documentation of you save an email, save a text message, and you have that evidence to back up your case.
Very nice. Thank you. You can come up here right after. And can we please give a really big round of applause for our panelists? Thank you so much for being here. Thanks, everybody. Is there still pizza? Yes. There is still pizza in the back if you guys want to grab a drink and get some pizza before you leave.